People have had a bit of a background in coding, some people haven't. So yeah, 5 key areas that we test. Does everyone know what these metrics stand for, or not really yet if you haven't used the platform? So tenacity, what's tenacity? Anyone remember? Who's done it before? Nope. So how many questions you have answered, essentially. So you get the score out of 100. If you answer 2 questions, you get 40 out of 100, right? 2 out of 5. 5 questions per test, per challenge. Accuracy. So that's how many times you hit that test button. Obviously, if you submit your test and you get nothing wrong, you get it 100% right first time, then that would give you a score of 100 for your accuracy. Every time you test and that display on the left-hand side goes red, that will deduct some points from your accuracy. Yeah. So it's really worthwhile using that test button, and obviously you've got to use that test button. But just beware that you might not want to test it before you've had a good go at writing the whole solution. Yeah, it depends on whether you're willing to sacrifice a bit of accuracy for the overall speed, or you can play the tactics, right? But for now, it's just getting as many questions correct as you can and learning along the way. Speed, so you'll get a base time for each question, and after that time is elapsed, your speed score will begin to get deducted as well. Yeah, so if you do it really quick, you get 100%. If you take a bit longer on some questions, your speed score gets deducted. Focus. So focus is how many times you go to external sites and leave the active window. So it's just a little event trigger in there. So if you leave the platform to go to Google, go to Stack Overflow to look up your solutions and copy and paste them in, then you're going to get some penalties, obviously, right? Elegance. Elegance, very, very important. So you don't just want to write code that you can read, you want to write code that other people in your team or your company can read as well, otherwise you won't be very popular. And also for yourself, like in 6 months' time, you're not going to want to read your spaghetti code, you're going to want to read nice, elegant code that follows some standards. Yeah, so that's why we do measure elegance as well in this course. The elegance is based on a little module called ESLint. So you can go online and look up ESLint. You've probably heard of linters for many languages. They're the things that highlight maybe when you've made just a few, well, the same thing, right? A few errors or a few elegance issues in your code, and they will highlight these things and offer solutions to improve your code. So yeah, we measure that as well. So they're the 5 metrics that we measure. You can generally tell whether someone's male or female based on the profiles, because the males tend to care less about accuracy and elegance than the females. They just want to rush through it and finish, and that's it. So we can probably see that some of these spiky profiles in the middle, where the elegance is quite low, they're probably males, right? But it's an interesting study that we'll do one day. Cool. So, as are so many of you, yeah, I think we'll just review the scores quite quickly. Where are we? So this one, the rank one. I'll come out of the Zoom. Cool. So if you were at the bottom today, please don't feel bad. It's just you've got more to improve than everyone else throughout the course, and you'll leapfrog lots of people, I'm sure. So let's just go from the bottom upwards. Oops. So Clarissa, so you didn't manage to submit any questions today? No? Okay, no worries. So this is a starting point, as I say, and after that, things can only get better, right? Kevin, same sort of situation. I know you were getting just some advice from other people in your team and working together, so that's great. Estefania, yep, so you managed to solve 1 question by the looks of it, yeah? 1 question you managed to solve? Yeah. And that was the first one. We can see the metrics break down as well per question on this right-hand side, yeah? So we can see that the scores here of the accuracy and the speed around 80, and then the focus, you went to some external sources to try and help you solve that one as well, probably. All right, moving on. Oh, wrong way. So Zara as well, just 1 question, that first one. I think the first one was a little bit tricky, right? Maybe a format people hadn't seen before, so it took them quite a long time to get their heads around that one. No worries, so there are easier ones. You're all hoping for those string questions, right? Welcome to JavaScript, that's all you've got to write. But today, unfortunately, that wasn't your first question. Gideon, similar situation. Yeah, first question, and then you had a go at the final one as well, perhaps. John. So John went for number 3. Didn't like the first question. Skipped on to number 3. and managed to solve that one. So well done. Similar situation, right? A lot of guys are in the same boat, just solving round one question. Kieran as well. Second question. Yeah, where's Kieran gone? Yeah, sorry, yeah, couldn't see it. Cool. So, yeah, similar situation. Sanjay managed to solve the first two. Yeah, good stuff. Into the top 10 now. So Chris. How's that, Chris? Who helped you? Oh, yeah. So he's been doing quite a lot on the platform, so a good one to get help from. Damiano, 45 today. Obviously these results as well, guys, they'll be on the platform for you to go and have a look at and look at your own code. We'll look at how to review other people's code as we do the review. All right, so pretty good. So looking at 3 questions correct there. Josue got 3 as well. Yeah, 3 correct questions, but really accurate on the 3 that he did get. So really close to a score of 60. Very nice. Mumtahin, your Elegance, you didn't look after your Elegance very well. Like I told you, look, male profile. I know the odds are against, the odds are with me saying it was male. There's not many females in the room, but see this Elegance, you know, the guys don't care about the Elegance so much. Where's Mumtahin got? There he is. He's hiding, right? Yeah. Cool, but other than that, you got all 5 questions right, so I can't complain too much, right? But imagine that if you paid a little bit more attention to the accuracy and the Elegance, then your score would easily be above 80, yeah? So well done for solving all of those. Nicholas, so Nick, yeah, all 5. And they've managed to give a bit of help as well to Chris and stuff, so nice one. Any feedback? No, cool. 4. Sorry, I've forgotten how to pronounce your name already. Shumon. Yeah, okay. So the Z's like an H. Okay, I got it, yeah. Nice, so really good profile. Probably the Elegance was the main thing that let you down, right, on the questions again. So just pay attention to that Elegance console down the bottom. Or are you a guy that says, no, I code my own way and I'm not going to obey the linters?
I have to figure out how to...
You have to figure out what the messages mean and how to interpret it.
How to do it better.
Okay, yeah. So we'll look at some code and we'll show you how to do that. All right, top 3 now. So the podium positions. 3rd was Max. So very well done to Max. Where's Max again? Yeah, over there. Cool. All 5, very good Elegance, you paid attention to that, thank you for that. Yeah, and just the speed and accuracy, but those things come with practice. 2nd, Jonathan. There's Jonathan. Yeah, nice one. How was that? Yeah? Yeah, you're getting used to it? You've done quite a bit of practice already on the platform?
Yeah, I went for a couple of 3 times.
Okay, nice. Nice. Good, so we say if you get a score above 90, you should definitely start on intermediate straight away next time. Yeah, so I think probably today that's just going to be one person who's done quite a lot on the platform already and has wanted to join us for quite some time and has finally got round to it and scored 99.2. So very well done to Cameron, yeah? So excellent stuff. I'm just going to quickly review the intermediate as well. So I think just 2 people played the intermediate. No, 3 had to go at the intermediate. I'm just going to review them quickly rather than do the whole reveal. So we had Shumon doing a couple of questions.
Oh, maybe later.
I think you've managed to solve a couple, right? 2 questions.
Yes, I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah, fantastic. And Cameron, really good score again, 80 already. I'm sure someone will challenge him soon though, keep him on his toes. And a few other guys just had a look and then bailed out, right? Or didn't have much time after beginner. So don't worry, we'll get there. All right, so let's actually go into the code review. So I'm just going to zoom into the top right hand here. So at the moment you probably cannot review the challenge, but the reason we do that is just that it gives us a chance to check for any errors in the scores and stuff like that, and we can manually edit them if we need to. And we don't spoil the surprise of who won in the events and things like that. But you can probably see that one of these icons on the top right looks like a spyglass with a plus symbol inside of it. And that's probably going to be your most useful thing to review after you do your challenges. Because when I do click on that, I will do so now. then you actually see everyone's solutions or attempts at solutions. So you can see who got it correct or who didn't quite manage to get there that time. And of course we can learn a hell of a lot from other people's code by analysing it, seeing what went well. And then you can probably see straight away there that everyone who tried that question had a slightly different approach, right? So there's no one way of solving things. Sometimes there's better ways than other ways, absolutely. And it all comes down to mainly the metrics that we measure, right? Is it the most elegant, readable way? Is it nice and reusable code that other people can understand? And is it, I guess, quite succinct as well? And we'll talk about sort of naming conventions and how to name our variables, all those little things. But anyway, back to the beginner. So we'll spend the code review mainly on the beginner today. Any questions before I move on to the actual code review?
How did you click on that page?
This page, yep, so the actual results. So the results, you just click on challenges and then go past on the top right hand side. Take a little while to load because there's been a few challenges. And once you do go onto that, so we're going to start on beginner. But I'll just do the intermediate one because I've already got the beginner open. And then the top right hand side, as I said, was that spyglass with the plus inside, yeah, for the code review. The magnifying glass with the plus inside. You found it, Josue? You might not be able to access it yet because it says available in half an hour or something like that, yeah, the results. But when you do, or if you go to a different challenge, that view will be open to you. Going to be really useful. Let's do the group review first, and then you can look at that in your own time or when you need. All right, so there's also this green button up here, the play symbol, and that means anyone can replay a past challenge. So if you've got a bit of friendly rivalry going with someone and you think, or even from a past boot camp, I know some of them, Nick, you know Tom and Victor, right, from previous boot camps. So if you want to do their test and see if you're actually better than them towards the end of the boot camp, then you're more than welcome. You can just click that green button in the top right hand side and that will replay the challenge with the exact same questions. Okay, and a good way to compare solutions again. All right, so that's what I'm going to do now. And that will take me to the beginner challenge that you have just done. Oh, I didn't do the team results, did I? That was a bit terrible. Never mind, we'll skip it for now. I'll tell you what team won later on. I'm just going to join Alpha, it doesn't matter for now. Okay, so the first question. So we get some written instructions that are usually fairly minimal. And then on the left-hand side, we have our actual test cases. So just so that people are 100% clear, get string indexes. What part of JavaScript is that?
Name of the function?
It's the name of the function in this case, yes? You'll see that all of our test cases are set up in this way. We've got the name of the function. We invoke that function by putting some brackets, some normal parentheses. And inside of those brackets, we put the inputs that we're sending into the function, otherwise known as parameters. Yeah, sorry, my Zoom's not quite as good as Ricardo's, but I do my best. Yeah, so these are known as arguments or parameters, and they're basically just the inputs into our function. So this is what we put in, and to the right-hand side of the triple equals are our outputs. So this is what we want our function to return. We'll talk about functions tomorrow and go into those a bit more depth, but in a nutshell, what is a function? What's a JavaScript function, or what's a function in general in programming? Something with an input and output, yeah, definitely. But why would we create a function and not just write code in a different way?
So you don't have to repeat yourself.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons, right? We can have some encapsulated code that we don't have to write again and again and again. We can just invoke it many times throughout our application and not have to repeat ourselves, yeah? So we have three different inputs here, hello, you, and this quotation sort of thing, these single quotes down the bottom. And that means we can use the same function with three different inputs, and we don't have to define that function three times. We only have to write the code once, which was your job in this challenge. What data type is our input in this case? Our input is definitely a string, yeah? So again, for those who aren't sure of some of the terms that I'm using, Then we'll talk about data types a lot more in depth tomorrow, and I think there'll even be some stuff in there for the ones who are very comfortable with it, a few little gotchas and things to catch you out. Yeah. So sorry if I'm teaching some of you to suck lemons or whatever the expression is, but yeah, I want to just make sure everyone's on a common ground. Yeah. And output wise, I think someone said it. Output wise is an array. We know it's an array because it's got those square brackets around it. Yeah, and that's how we write an array literal in JavaScript. And we have many ways of writing string literals, but we'll come on to those. Essentially, single quotes, double quotes, or backticks for strings in JavaScript. Cool. So the suggestion was to use a for in loop. And I think this caused a bit of confusion because some people are used to seeing a for loop, and they've used those mainly from either quite old JavaScript or even other languages. The for loop is one of these things that exists almost across any language going. And yeah, it's been a staple of programming for a long, long time. JavaScript has introduced some other loops just to make writing these loops a little bit easier. So if we wrote a basic for loop, for anyone who's done that, how would we iterate over each item in our string? Anyone know? Or what's the syntax for a general for loop?
False up, but when you can use any
Yeah, let's do something like that, right? Let index equals, so you have to put your starting index, yeah? What would go in the next part of a for loop? The limit, yeah? I like calling it the limit, yeah? So in this case, it's a bit hard to write, right? But we probably want the length of the string, yeah? Our limit is the length of the string. Otherwise, we don't want to keep our loop going after our string has finished. So in this case, we'd have to do something like, well, we haven't even put our input. So let's first name our input. What should we name this?
Let's say string.
Let's say string. Is there a better way we can do it? What is it? Hello, you. Yes, it's not too much, is it? Hey, greeting. You's not really a greeting, is it? It's quite rude. Hey, you. But yeah, we can call it greeting if you want for now. Oops, sorry. Okay. So what that has done is that stored our input inside of a variable. Yeah. So this parameter here has stored our input inside of a variable. So that means we can reuse it anywhere in our function as we need. So our limit is going to be essentially the length of the word, the length of the greeting. So we can do greeting. How do we get the length of something? Or the dot length, right? Yeah. Try not to give it away. Will greeting dot length work as our limit?
No. Has to be small or
Greater or
So we need some sort of condition. So we'll put our condition on our index. So our index has got to be less than greeting.length. Is that right? What's the length going to be of HELLO, the word hello? 5. Yeah. So index less than 5. So that loop will run for an index of 0, an index of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah. So that's correct. And then the third part of a for loop is what? The increment, yeah. So, oh, sorry, not I++, index++ in this case, yeah. So increase the index by 1, yeah. Plus plus means take whatever this value was and add 1 onto it. So you'll often see a for loop written like that. That's not super easy if you're just learning programming for the first time, right? There's quite a lot to remember. Where do these semicolons go? What does it all mean? So therefore, we've got access to a couple of more modern loops. One of them is the for in loop, and one of them is the for of loop. Yeah, so there's training on the beginner JavaScript platform for both of these loops, and we can rewrite the same thing. Let's just focus on a for in for now. So we can still say our variable is index. And where are we getting those index values from? Greeting, yeah, greeting was our string, remember, over here. So if we say for let index in greeting, that has done the same thing as line number 2. Line number 3 is doing exactly the same thing as line number... Well, not... yeah, it is doing the same thing in this case, yeah, as line number 2. What's easier to remember and write? Probably line number 3, I hope you agree. Especially with things like setting the limits. If you made a mistake and maybe put less than or equals to or something like that for your limit, then essentially we're running our loop one extra time and we might get some weird values or some undefined values in there. So it's quite easy to make mistakes with the old style loop as well, and they're common bugs in programs. So that's why we now have a couple of other loops to make it a bit easier for us. So if that works for you, then go for the more modern loops, yeah? The for in and the for of loop. So what exactly gets set into this variable in a for in loop? Giving you a clue with the name. So when we use a for in loop, the value associated to this variable name, we can call this whatever we want, right? This is just a variable name. We've stored something in a variable so that we can use it later. It makes sense to call it index in this case because this loop will loop over the index value for this greeting. If we had a for of loop, it doesn't make sense to call it index because this will actually loop over the value for each associated with each index of a string or an array or another data type. All right. So
is that the main differences between the in and of?
In and of, yeah. So in will access the index of a data type, and for a string that starts at 0, 1, 2, and then the value associated for each index of a string is going to be, in this case, HELLO. Yeah?
How would that work with an object, like with the key value pairs?
So, yeah, so for an object, then index in will get the key, and will of get the values? Yeah, I think it will. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the key differences between those loops, and you can use them with, I want to say any iterable. I think you can. Objects are a bit of a special case, so that's why I was a bit hesitant on the objects question. Yeah, so I'd have to test it. There's other methods available for objects that make looping over them a bit easier, or extracting values and keys out of them. Yeah. Cool. Anyway, so now we have a variable called index, which should allow us to access each position in this string, right? So index should take the value of 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 in this first case. But how do we actually get them to output from the function? Any ideas? What did you guys use?
Then you see
Right, so we want to return an array, right? We can clearly see that. Sometimes that array is empty, sometimes it has index values in it. So let's initialize an array, yeah? So what should we call it? Let's just call it indices. And we don't need to call it indices array. If you wish, you can call it indices array, but in JavaScript, the very fact that you put it equal to a square bracket should be obvious that you've made it an array, yeah? And then at the end, we want to return that same array. So at the moment, we've set indices to be an empty array, and then we've returned it. So we will always get an empty array at the moment. So we want to do something inside of our loop to add these numbers, add these indices inside our array. So if I do it at the moment, you see the last question is correct because that's an empty array. but the other ones are not. What can I do inside my loop to fix this? Yeah, so there is a method, or if you like, an inbuilt function in the core JavaScript language that lets us manipulate objects or arrays, and one of them is push. And what push does is it adds an element or a value to the last index in the current array that you've referenced. So our array is called indices, yeah? So I can, wrong way around. So I can do indices.push, and then I can push something inside of that array. What do I want to push inside? The index, yeah. So I can just do that. Anything else needed? Call the function. So the platform calls the function for us, so we actually don't need to call the function. Yeah. But usually, yes, if you're writing your own code, of course, you would need to call that function to use it. Think we're good? Does anyone not understand any of those lines and wants me to explain a bit more, or get someone else in the room to explain who does know? Not saying that I can't, but you know, it's good for you guys to help each other. No? That sort of makes sense? Yeah?
Do you need to add a semicolon after?
Okay, yeah, good question. So we've got the confetti, so it's definitely right. All green. Did we get any elegance issues? No elegance issues found, so that's good. We wrote elegant code as well. Your semicolons questions were where? For line 2, line 4?
On 5. I just
On
never
5.
Like, do you need one there?
Okay.
In terms of elegance.
Yep. So what happens if I test this code then with a semicolon there after the for loop? Is it going to like it? Of course, it's still right. It's still correct. It doesn't break the code. But it does say it's an unnecessary semicolon. So you would get a slight elegance penalty for that. Why is it unnecessary? Can anyone explain?
Because you've got one just on the line above.
Got one on the line above, yeah, but that is inside of the for loop. This is outside of the for loop, so they're saying different things. But why do I not need a semicolon there on line 5? Do we have one on line 7? That looks quite similar to me. Line 5 and line 7 look quite similar.
Is it because the closing curly bracket is, it's basically saying that it's I don't know the proper way of saying it, but like it's already executed, and that's what you would say with the semicolon anyway, so it's doubling up.
Yeah, essentially. So a semicolon in JavaScript means an end of a statement, and this bit here is a whole block of code. Yeah, these curly braces are a block. So if you end a block with a colon curly brace, of course that's the end also of a statement, right? It's the end of something. So you do not need an extra semicolon there. It's, as it says, unnecessary, right?
Question on that, Graham. Is that current modern JavaScript, or if we go back to say JavaScript 2 or 3 years ago, that's not the case?
I think that's always been the case, yeah. If you end the block, you definitely didn't need a semicolon after it. But I didn't start coding with JavaScript until probably about 7 years ago or something like that. So I don't know any further back than that, to be honest.
Is
Yeah.
that also the case? What about objects? Are they also the semicolons?
No, that's different. So an object is actually a data type, right? When we have these curly braces that denote an object, so you're saying if we had something like a key, and with some sort of what's going on? Some sort of value in there, yeah? So you're saying if we define that perhaps as some sort of object, do we need a semicolon after that?
I thought so.
Yeah. Because this isn't saying this is a block of code. Unfortunately, I don't know if they run out of symbols or what, but you know, in programming languages, you often end up with symbols meaning different things in different contexts. So this curly brace means open a block of code write the block of code inside. This could be many, many lines. And then close that block, close that loop in this case, right? The bit of code that you want to run again and again is inside of those curly braces. Doesn't mean that here. This is just a data type. Yeah, this is denoting this is an object with some key value pairs. So even though it's the same symbol, they do mean different things. And that means we need to say, right, I've finished writing my object here. Here's a semicolon, end of my statement. And that is the correct way to write it. Yeah?
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions? All right. I know it's taken a bit of time today, but it's good to answer everyone's questions and any nagging thoughts you might be having. I probably shouldn't have skipped that, but hey, we skipped it now. Get the capital letters. So we can see that this belongs to filter training. I think some of you, let's have a look to see what some of you did. I think some of you, just because you'd come from a for in loop, were also trying to use for in loops, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's more than one way to solve it, but I think filter does simplify things quite a bit, and I'll show you why in a second. So that's all the first question. If anyone wants me to take their solution ever as well, let me know and we can help solve it as a group. On which one? This one?
Yeah.
So where's yours, Josue? Let me just zoom out so I can see and then I'll zoom back in. Okay, yeah. So we can take that one in a second. So we can see that some people have used filter, some people have used for of loops. Yeah, you see there's numerous ways to solve it. And when you go back through these as well, it's useful to look at, who did I say had not very good elegance once? Yeah, Mumtahin, so I said you lost quite a few points on your elegance. So can anyone spot why Mumtahin didn't get perfect elegance for that question? It's kind of convoluted, it's all in one line. So we may have got a penalty for it being too long. I think if it goes over 80 characters, then you get penalised for the line being too long. Yeah, so it's not the most readable, is it? Because everything's just all in one line. But he might have got away with that. Anything else? How about that last line? Just seems to be floating a bit to me. This curly brace here, what does that belong to? Does that belong to the return statement or belong to the function? Belongs to the function, right? Here's the opening one. So the closing one must go below the block of code that it belongs to. Yeah, so that would be an indentation elegance thing, yeah? So, yeah, worth going back through your code, looking at those, looking at other people's, seeing what works best, yeah? So that again is all in one line. I think that's okay. Try not to, I know it's short, but you know, L for some people, I think it's obvious in this case, but for some people they might be, oh, what's L? You know, in this case you just mean a single letter, which is fine, but if your code is filled with A dot and B dot and C, it's just, you know, it's very hard to read. Very important, yeah. So make sure you name things semantically. Can people hear me down the end, by the way? Yeah. Okay, cool. I'm just aware that I'm talking this way always, and you might not be able to hear me. All right, let's take Josue's code, and we will fix it. All right. So I'm just going to write it a little bit more readable for me. So what you can often do is, after a variable, you can drop down onto a new line and indent it. Yeah, so that's quite a nice way of doing it sometimes. And you could also break it after the arrow function if you wished. Numerous ways to break it. Yeah. Where to put that one? Probably there. All right. Okay. So now that at least fits on my projector screen a little bit better. Whether it's more readable, that's for you to argue, right? But it works for me. He's also invoked the function, so remember we don't need to do that. But I'll leave it there just for a second so that we can see what the relevant question is. What Okay, so now it's in terms of spot the error. So the input, letters. What is the value of letters in this case? Based on the bit I've just commented out.
A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah, it's this, right? The array containing 4 values, 4 strings, right? They're in quotes. Some are capitals, some aren't. So we just wanted to return the capitals inside of an array, right? B and E as a capital, as an array. So why isn't it working? Letters is the array. Yeah, we're calling filter on that array. Because I've dropped it down onto a new line, we do need a return in there, but that obviously wasn't an issue before. Anyone spot an error? I thought it looked okay. Yeah, it looks okay. Let's test it. No. Oops, didn't return anything. Unexpected token. Let's get rid of the comment, just so it's not. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't. Let me just copy and paste it exactly as it was and see whether it was a. Sorry, just let me zoom out again. It seemed to work for me. Oh, that's your GitHub, so I apologise for that. So it may just be because you tried to invoke the function, it was confusing the platform. So please don't invoke the function. So if I delete that and just run it as is, it works. So there's actually nothing wrong with that code. I think it was just the fact that you were invoking the function.
But actually,
Yeah.
on the platform, it doesn't say that we shouldn't invoke the function.
No, okay, but now you know, right? So, yeah, apologies if it wasn't clear, but yeah, never invoke the function on the platform. But it's a good practice to be aware of, so you do it in your own code. Cool. How does filter method work? Yeah, okay. Thank you for that question. So let me just tidy this up a little bit again. Let's leave it like that for now. Yeah, so the best documentation I like to use is MDM, so Mozilla Developer Network, and that's really good for listing the number of arguments that a method can take, and also what inputs it accepts and what outputs it gives. So firstly, I like to think of what are the outputs for filter. So firstly, filter is an array method. Yeah, so you can only call it on arrays. It will only work on array data types. Why can we use it in this case? Because our input letters is an array of letters, right? It's in these square brackets. So it's an array, a list of various items. So filter itself also outputs an array. So no matter what the array contains as an input, whether it's got strings in it, inside of the array this is, yeah, so it's an array of strings, or it's an array of objects, or it's an array of mixed data types, numbers, strings, objects all combined, it will always output another array itself. Even if the little test condition you write in here returns false, filter will still return an array, but it will return an empty array. Yeah, no matches, if you like. This bit here, if people aren't aware, is simply another function. It's an arrow function. So we could rewrite that if we wanted as a function, and it would be an anonymous function. So it has no name, it's anonymous. Takes an input of letter, and then returns the result of that. So that's all that code was previously saying. I'm going to leave it like that for now, just for people who aren't familiar with arrow functions, yeah? So filter itself takes another function. That function should return a truthy or falsy value. If you don't know what they are exactly, just think of it as true and false for now. Every value in JavaScript can be coerced or can become either true or false. If this returns something that is truthy, then that value gets included in the final array, in the filtered array. If that function returns falsy, that value is discarded. It's not included in the final array. Yeah, so remember, filter always returns an array, but only if this inner function bit of code evaluates to true for the test on the input. In our case, the input is the letter, so we're doing some sort of test on the letter. So the first element in our array is a little lowercase a. That little lowercase a, we're saying, does the lowercase a equal lowercase a dot to uppercase? So in other words, is a lowercase a the same as equals equals equals? Yeah, it's an equality operator, comparison operator. Does that equal an uppercase a? True or false, guys? What do you think? False, yeah? So that's clearly false. So does that little a get included in our final array? No, absolutely not. Yeah, because the correct test that we've written, we're comparing whether our input equals that input converted to an uppercase letter. So this function runs as many times as necessary. How many times does it run for our first test case, for our first invocation of the function here? 4 times, was that? Yeah? It runs 4 times, that's correct, because there are 4 elements in this array. And we want to test every single element in this array. A, are you an uppercase? Nope. B, are you an uppercase? Yep, stick it in the final array. E, are you uppercase? Yep, stick it in the final array. Z, no, I'm not. So we end up with this final array. You probably didn't answer back, but you get the idea. So we end up with an array with 2 letters in it, 2 uppercase letters. And in fact, the second one as well also will only run 4 times. Yeah? If we had, of course, 6 elements in that array, it would run 6 times. Yeah? So again, we don't have to write these complicated for loops and conditions. Filter will iterate over each element in the array for us and run this inner bit of code for us. Sort of making sense for people who have only seen that for the first time today. It's a lot to take in, but it's at least in theory, is that understanding what that filter method is doing. Yeah.
Why did it say the bottom that it was wrong? I guess it's oops.
I think probably because we were messing around with it. Let's have a look now if we run it. Yeah, it works, right? I think probably we just run it in an intermediate stage and it was wrong, yeah. But that's correct. The code on the board is correct. Maybe it's missing some semicolons, right? Another elegance thing. Make sure you do put those semicolons in the correct places. Your code will still work in modern JavaScript. Historically, it wouldn't, Max, but now this time the modern compilers and the runtime environments are clever enough to understand your code and input those semicolons for you. But as a best practice, you should still put some semicolons in there. Where should they go in that function? Can we all see it? Line 2, interesting. Yes, what happens if I put one there? Ooh, it's underlined in red, which is not a good start. Why can I not put one there?
No, you should
Delete
delete the full stop first.
the full stop first. Oh. What's that going to do? That's just going to return my input, right? Input letters, return letters. There you go, there they are back again. We haven't run the rest of the code then. This will all get ignored if you do that. You've got a return statement, right? Whenever you hit a return statement, anything below, any statements below that return statement will not get run in a function, yeah? So, no, we definitely want the dot there. What the dot is doing is chaining on the next method or the next instruction to our function, yeah? So letters dot filter. I'm calling the filter method on letters and returning the result of that filter method. Yeah? Make sense, Jose? No, not really. We'll talk more about functions tomorrow afternoon, and yeah, I don't think I can explain it much better on that for now. So yeah, in other words, we don't need a semicolon there because our statement hasn't finished. Yeah, we're chaining on something else. Letters dot filter. We're chaining on this method. So where does our
Yeah, because you.
yeah, that was essentially like that before, right?
Yeah, okay, now 100%.
And we can add
Okay.
just some white space. I can add as much white space as we want. Technically, I could have that over there, and that would still run.
Okay.
A bit confusing, so that's why we follow standardized rules. Yeah. Line 4, someone said. Yep. Because that is our inner block of code, right? And therefore, our statement finishes there. Return that, true or false. And once we've returned that, our final statement ends there. Yeah, our filter method ends there. So we also need a semicolon there. All right. It's half an hour and 2 questions. It will get quicker as we go on, I promise, but hopefully this is useful to many of you. You can agree with me if you want. Thank you. I get some feedback on day 1, yes. Right. Next question. So let's submit that. Yeah. All right then. So some of these questions, it's not a case of having to write all of the code yourself. We've been given a scenario. It's basically a conditional question, right? If both scores are less than 50, do this. If the first score is less than 50, but this one's greater than, do this. Yeah, so there's lots of conditions in there. So how do we often break up our flow of our functions or our program in programs or in programming languages? What are the common keywords, if you like, to denote conditions? If, yeah, if else if, elif, depending on the languages, yeah. So there are these keywords that allow us to add some logic, yeah. If one thing, do this. If another thing, or else this thing, do something else. So, yeah. This is not written with those keywords if and else, but it is written in this format with a question mark and a colon. Essentially, what one's short that I can write out? Let's do it here. So if that looks a bit confusing to people, and I agree that it does look a little bit confusing, that is like saying if first score, let's just copy this bit, right? So if first score is less than 50 and, yeah, second score is also less than 50, so I'm going to group them together. I can use brackets to group any statements in JavaScript. Then we have a block of code and we want to return need to improve. Yeah? Else, I've got another condition. Those two. Yeah, else if the first score is less than 50 and, oh no, we've had that one, right? And the second score is greater than or equal to 50, then we have getting better as our output. Yeah, so essentially all that code that we had before is a shorthand way of writing if-else statements. So if you're just learning and you're happier to write if-else statements, sorry, it's else-if, right? It wasn't the final one. So else-if, and then your final statement would be an else. And often you will write it on the same line like that as well. But whatever, just semantics. So those lines from 2 to 6 are the same pretty much as lines 8 to 11. Yeah, obviously we haven't finished the whole statement, the whole question, but essentially those bits of code would do the same thing. For now, write whatever is easiest for you to understand. For most people, that begins with the if-else statements because it's more explicit, it's more semantic, and then over time, you can think of using ternaries. So ternary operator is where you write your condition. This is our condition, the thing that we're testing, the bit that usually goes inside the brackets. Then we put a question mark because we're testing it, right? If that condition evaluates to true, we return the bit straight after the question mark and before the semicolon. If it evaluates to false, we run the bit of code after the semicolon. That's essentially what a ternary is doing. So I'm going to get rid of the if-else. Any questions?
Do you need to put return inside the if and if-else statements as well?
Yeah, if I wanted to return it, absolutely, yeah. But
if it's a ternary, you just need to write it once at the beginning.
Yeah. So if you wanted to return all these values, you would need a return inside of each condition, yeah? Inside of each block. Otherwise, you wouldn't get anything outputted from your function. The code would still run, it just wouldn't output it. But with a ternary, you're quite right. If it's a single statement, you just need one return in front of it. Now, our linter's given us a big hint as to where this ternary statement is wrong. So a ternary essentially goes condition, question mark, truthy, colon, falsy, yeah? But in this case, the falsy is the whole thing because they're nested ternaries. It's a bit of a complicated question for a beginner. I do apologize. So then we've actually got another ternary. We've got condition, question mark, truthy, and then whatever comes afterwards we want to be falsy. Yeah, if that condition wasn't met. So what's the problem with this bit that's underlined here? Instead of a semicolon, it should be just a normal colon. Because again, the semicolon is terminating the statement. But we haven't offered what happens if first score isn't less than 50 or second score isn't greater than 50. Yeah? In that case, we've just terminated the statement. So there is no falsy option. A ternary needs both what to run if that condition is true and what to run if that condition is false. You can't have a ternary with just an if. A ternary needs an if and an else if always, yeah? Denoted by a question mark and a normal colon, just as it was up here.
Is that good coding practice though? Because I thought you only had...
What, nested ternaries?
So you've got almost, you've got 3 tests here, haven't you? So is that good coding practice?
I don't like it personally. I think it's a bit convoluted and not easy to read. Yeah. So how would I improve that? I might even go back to if-else statements, right? Just so it's easier to use. Or I'd have separate functions. So one would test if both scores were lower than 50, and one would test if both scores... Oh, there isn't one like that. But yeah, I don't know. I'd split it up probably in some way just to make it a little bit more readable. But it's a preference thing again, right? But good point. Any other questions on ternaries? I think probably best just to practice from question 1 on the ternary operator beginners if they don't make sense. Yeah, but it's just another way of writing if-else statements and writing a bit of logic in our programs. All right, cool. I'll skip that one. What's happened? I've skipped both there. Let me skip that again. I'll go back into question 4. This is quite a good question. So, is the given argument of type array? That is the question. So we get some input. In our first test case, what data type is the input? An array. It is an array, yeah. But we might not know that beforehand, right? It's obvious to see from our test cases, but if we've got a huge program and we're just passing around variables all the time, it won't be easily visible there what data type it is. So often we need to test in our code whether a variable is of a certain type so that we can run certain bits of code on it. Remember I said before that filter, we can only use filter on arrays. What happens if we try and use filter on something that isn't an array?
Won't return it.
We're going to get an error, right? So essentially it's going to not enable our code to run. Yeah, so if we tried to run string.filter, it just doesn't work, yeah? String.filter is not a function, you'd get an error. So therefore, often it's useful to check what type of data our variables are. There are a couple of ways to do that in JavaScript. Does anyone know a couple of ways, or at least one way?
Type of
There is type of, which is a keyword again, yeah.
and is array method.
And in this case, we're going to use the isArray method. Let's go with a type of to begin with, and we'll show why that's not a good use case, and then we'll show why array.isArray is the preferred way to do it in this case, or perhaps the only way to do it in this case. Data type for the second one, day Tuesday. What's this? Object, yep, because it's curly braces. This one here? Array, what type of array specifically? Empty, yeah, there's no values inside of it. And the last one? String, yep, with single quotes. Could write it with double quotes or backticks as well, but that's fine. Okay, so we mentioned there was this keyword called type of. And let's call our input data, if that's all right. So I want to return the type of data, yeah, the type of the input that we have. I'm not saying this is the correct solution. I just want to see what this returns and talk about it. Okay. Those results. Obviously they're wrong, but in the first case, we said we had an array, but it says you returned objects. It's a bit weird, right? It's not wrong technically, yeah, because any complex data type in JavaScript is an object or it inherits from the object prototype. It's a type of object, right? We won't go into that now, but yeah. String's a bit different. We've actually got string written here, yeah? So it has recognized that that's clearly a string. It's not just a generic type of object. It's clearly a string because strings are what we call primitives. They're more simple data types in JavaScript. So type of is really useful if we're just working with certain types of data, or we want to distinguish between certain types of data. So it can distinguish strings, numbers, objects are grouped together, whether it's an array or a set or an object or all these other ones. What else we got? We've got booleans. What's a boolean? True or false, exactly. What else? Undefined, null, it would still get these things. Not a number, I think it would also return. These sorts of things, right? But it's not perfect, and sometimes we need a bit more fine-tuning or just a bit more detail about our type of object that we've got. And in this case, there is a static method on the array object that we can use, and the hint is in the question. It is called isArray. That is the name of the method. So we can return It's a static method on the array object, so you have to reference that object. And then type isArray. And because it's a function or a method, we pass our input into it. And our input is our data in this case. Yeah. So this is an inbuilt method that belongs only to the array class, if you like, or the array object, and we can use that to test whether our data is actually an array or not. Object's a bit too generic in this case, right? We don't want to just see whether it's an object or not. So that, I think, will work. Anyone who's done the question, if you want to pull me up and say, hang on a minute, please do. If not, I'm going to test it. Confetti time, looks good. Yeah, no elegance, all good, right? So these things, look, you're not expected to know them if you haven't worked with JavaScript for a little while. You'll just find that when you start building programs, you're going to need to test your data types in your code, and then it's a case of talking to developers around you, looking at the documentation, just learning the language of JavaScript really well, and you'll just know that JavaScript has a method in it to test for arrays. Yeah, there's another one for, I mentioned the data type not a number. Now, confusingly, not a number, there's a method on the number class called number.isNaN, and that will test whether something is another data type of not a number. Yeah. So over time, you find these things and you learn how to use them in your code. But that's what the training's there for, and hopefully you'll remember it now after me boring you to death about it. All right. Any questions? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm if it's an array method, is that why it says array dot?
Yeah, so we've got different types of methods. So filter was written something like, let's just say 1 dot minus 2, and we had an array and we could call filter directly on it, right? And if we said that has a number and we want numbers only greater than 0, right? That will come back. Return array.filter num number greater than 0. I think that's all right. What do you think that will return, this function?
1.
Yeah, just an array. Don't forget it's an array.
Oh, sorry.
Return an array with 1 in it. So we test that. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Yeah? Cool. As expected. But that looks quite different from that sort of format, yeah? Why didn't we write array dot filter and then pass in our array as our input? Yeah, so you'll see the two different ways of calling methods. And it's a bit complicated to go into, but basically it's how inheritance works in languages and specifically in JavaScript. So filter is an instance method. It is available on every single instance, every single array that you create. The isArray method is not available on this array that you have created here. If I wrote array 1, minus 2 dot isArray, it would say that's not a method. That doesn't belong to this new array instance that you have created. It only belongs to this inbuilt array object, this one here, in the language. Yes, you'll see at least two different ways of writing or accessing methods in the JavaScript language. Partial understanding? That's all I'd hope for at this stage, yeah? So we'll talk a bit more about inheritance later on in the course, quite a bit later on, but yeah, that's essentially the reason, right? Different types of methods. One's static, one's an instance method. Any other questions? Got 9 minutes to do the final one. I think we can do it. All right. Git Singer details. So this is actually part of the 4 in you're off for the day. Yeah? Okay. Cool, Sanjay. See you tomorrow. We'll catch up tomorrow morning on the stand-up. Yeah. So this is actually in the for in loop training again, and yeah, you can definitely do it that way. I think it's quite a bit more complicated than the easiest way to do it. So should we start with the easy way, and then we'll try and rewrite it using a for in loop to test your understanding? Did anyone solve this in quite an easy way? So what do we want to do? We have what? What's our input in this case, guys? Object, fantastic. What do we want to output?
An array.
An array, yeah. A value, but definitely an array type value. And that array has what inside of it?
Values of the object.
The values of the object. Fantastic, yep. So, what's an easy way of doing that? Anyone know?
Object.values.
Yeah, so another one of these static methods that this time belongs to the object class, or the object. Return object.values, and then pass in our input. What was our input again? Singer, right? Make sure it's nice and semantic. And object.values is one of these inbuilt methods that always returns an array. The elements in that array are the values of the object that you passed in. So singer is our object that we passed in, which had, which had a key of name, keys of name, children, and instruments, and the values belonging to those keys were Beyonce, 3, and vocals. So that is what we should get outputted. Let's run that. Confetti time, all good, everything works. So that's definitely the simplest way to do it. However, it's in the for in training. So did anyone write it using the for in way of doing things? Yeah? Huh? But you did, but it's wrong.
Yeah.
Should we take it again and try and rework it? Is that right? Yeah? How long we got? 6 minutes. I can obviously go back into it. I'm just being lazy. Here is it. Okay. So you've tried to invoke it again. Let's just take the function and see what that works first. I'll zoom back in a second. Nope, okay, so it's not working. Why is it not working? Right. Oh, so we got, that's probably why I've copied and pasted it. Hold on. That's better. Ah, I think it was right again, Josue. Yeah, so you got it correct. Just don't invoke the function, right? We got it now, we got it now.
What does that mean to invoke the function?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so... Yeah, all right. Again, we're talking about functions tomorrow, but very important thing. So this function keyword just creates a function definition, or a function declaration is the correct term. So all it does is store a function in memory. It stores a bit of code in memory that we can reuse or we can use at some later point. So this here, if I've got it in my code, will not do anything apart from store a bit of code in memory at a certain address, and it will give it a reference of get singer details. Yeah, if you like, it gives it a variable of get singer details, and the value of that variable is a function with all of that code inside. So nothing gets outputted at this stage, it's just stored in memory. If you want to use that function anywhere in your program, anywhere in your code base, anywhere in your app, then you need to invoke that function or run that function. You'll hear both terms used interchangeably. How do we invoke a function? Josue, I think you know how to do it.
Well, you
I
just
could
call
be
it
function
function
as well. I could be function as well. Like I got
Yeah, so some people have done it, yeah, but you don't need to in the platform. And you got the correct answer, yeah? Yeah, so it's a bit temperamental, right, if you call the function, which is why we do it for you. Yeah. But how do we do that? So, Josue said we just write the name of the function, which was get singer details, I think, right? Nope, get selection. What was it called? It was called get singer details, but maybe I just need to put SI in. Yeah. So you write the name of the function, and then you write a pair of parentheses, and that is essentially it. That invokes the function, but you need to put your inputs inside of the curly braces. Inside of the normal parentheses, inside of the brackets. So you invoke a function just by writing its name and putting some parentheses afterwards. That's it. So you might have declared a function up here. You then might have written 100 other lines of code. And then after you've executed that bit of code, finally you want to actually run this function. Yeah, after you've got data from some other place or from some third-party API on the web or whatever. Yeah. So you declare your function wherever, but when you actually want to run that code, then you must type its name, pair of parentheses, and any inputs that you want in here, right? So that would obviously just be a string given to our function with a value of input. So in this case, we wanted an object. So we'd have to make sure that we put an object in here. What's happening there? And then we would give it, what would we have again? We had name, and then our value was something like Beyonce, right? So essentially that would be how you invoke a function. Just put its name, parentheses, and then any inputs you want to give to that function. You could then on the very next line of code call that function again, right, with a different input. So once you've got that one function declaration, you can invoke it as many times as you need, or as many times as you want. Yeah, this is one of the reasons we create functions, right? So we can reuse this bit of code again and again and again. Good question. Anything else, guys? Okay, I'm going to do one question on intermediate, and then I'll let you get on with the rest of your tasks for the rest of the day. I must be getting on a bit. So that was beginner, essentially. So very well done for having the first go at the challenges. Hopefully now, after going through it once and seeing some questions solved, it makes a bit more sense than getting bombarded with it about an hour ago. Yeah? So hopefully it'll only get easier. And any questions that you have that you want to talk to me or Ricardo about, please let us know. We're happy to go through any questions with you. All right, let me leave that one. I'm just going to look at one question of this, and even for those that think I'm nowhere near ready for intermediate yet, I just want you to try and pay attention, just so that we try and break it down into more of a step-by-step approach and more take a problem-solving approach rather than what actual bits of JavaScript I need to solve it. Yeah, in other words, what steps can I take to solve more complex problems? So let's do that one. Okay, so you're going to tell me what you think we need to do to solve the question, and we're just going to write it out in plain English, and then we'll translate that English into a bit of JavaScript. So this is the question. Find the first word in capitals. Yes, there's a little extra condition there. Please return an empty string if no relevant word is found. So it's probably telling you that for a reason. Maybe the method that you want to use won't usually return an empty string. It might return something different. So we might need some form of if, else, ternary operator, and or these sort of conditions. We might need to use filter. Let's have a look at the test cases a little bit as a group first, and then we can suggest different approaches. Yeah, filter might work. So these are our test cases. For those who weren't clear on how to invoke functions, notice that these test cases are just function invocations. The name of the function, parentheses, input, close parentheses. Yeah? Then after the triple equals, that's our output. Does the question at least make sense to people? Yeah? So it's the whole word that's capitalized. Yeah, not otherwise we'd return the here, wouldn't we? Because it's got a capital T. So obviously we need the whole word to be capitalized. There are no capital words there, so we just return an empty string. All right. Approaches. What do you think? Tell me in plain English. Don't tell me find or filter or anything like that. Just tell me.
We have to do the array from the sentence. Yes?
So, okay, yep. So let's just say that we've got a string sentence or something up here. Yeah, I know we're going to get tons of errors, but that's fine. And you want to turn a sentence into an array.
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah.
And then check each element if it is
Can I say check each word in array? Yeah, because we're going to get each word. Yeah. So sentence into an array of words. Check each word. To see if it is capitalized. Yeah. Okay. If it is, what?
If it is, we can create a new array.
If capitalized, do we need to even do that? I don't think we need to return an array, do we? What do we need to return?
String.
Okay, so if capitalized, return the value. Oh, that's good. Never seen that one. If not, oh, that's good as well. If not, return what? Return empty string. Empty string. Cool. Now, if you went into a job interview and you didn't know the language that they wanted you to write it in, or even if they weren't fussy, right, what language you write your solution in, it would be perfectly acceptable to start with something like that. Pseudocode, yeah? This shows how you think about a problem, how you try and solve a problem. I've got an input of a sentence. I want to take that sentence and just get the words somehow, yeah? We might even not know that we want it in an array. Then we want to check each word to see if it's a capital. If it is, I want to return that capitalized word. If not, empty string, right? That's it. So, I mean, that's problem solving. And then we've got to just translate it into our language of choice. For this boot camp, that's JavaScript. Should we give that bit a go? All right. Start at the top or start with the easiest bit? What do you want to do? It's up to you. You tell me what to do. Start at the top. Okay, let's work top down. Yeah. Sometimes that's not always the easiest way, right? I maybe start with the input and then the output, and I do the chunky, hard bit in the middle. So, start at the top. String sentence. So let's just call it sentence. Is that all right for our input variable name? Anyone know how to turn, what have we got, a string? Yep. Anyone know how to turn a string into an array in JavaScript? What?
Split method, although we want to make sure we're splitting by words. So
Mm-hmm.
the argument, I think the word would be argument, in between brackets you need to put a space
Mm-hmm.
instead of just the empty string.
Okay, absolutely. So I'm not going to return anything at this stage, but I'm going to take my sentence, which is my long string. I'm going to spell it right to begin with. I'm going to use the split method, which is a method that belongs to every instance of a string. So that's why I'm writing it this way. So I have an instance of a string, which is our sentence, call the split method on it. And inside of this method, I need to tell it what to split by. Now we wanted to split it into words. So how, in English, do we usually denote where one word ends and another word begins? Space, yeah? So we give it a string of a space as our separator. Yeah, we're saying every time you find a space, create a new element in an array. So we should hopefully end up with an array of I, then love, then eating, then tuna, then sandwiches, right? So we should, from that first line, end up with an array of 5 elements, 5 words. If you're unsure of that, we can just check that. Let's return it for now. This would, of course, penalize your accuracy, right, if you were going for the best score, but now we're just learning, so it doesn't matter. Let's test it. Oops, didn't return anything. What have I done wrong? Probably because of all this stuff, right? It's not going to compile. Let me... test it again. Okay, look at that. You returned an array with those. So now that we've got these separate words separated by commas, we can write some other code to loop over, yeah, a for loop or a method like find or filter that will loop over these elements for us, and then we can test them. Let's bring my pseudocode back. Sentence into an array of words. Have we achieved that? I think so. Yes, awesome. Check each word to see if it's capitalized. We might even want 2 stages for this, right? Loop over each word. And then see if each word is capitalized. Yeah, we've got a lot of options for line number 3, looping over each word. What method, what built-in method makes sense in this case? 2 uppercase. I think we're definitely going to use 2 uppercase. We're going to use that in the capitalized check, so I'll just write that down here for now, yeah. How about just looping over? 2 uppercase doesn't loop over anything, it just transforms.
For in again.
We could use a for in, but I think we've got an even better method to simplify it for now. We could use for each as well. Filter, close to filter. Find. I think we should use find. Yeah. It does say find the first word in capitals, so that's what I want to use. If someone wants to give me another solution after we do it that way, you're more than welcome, yeah? And there's no one best way. So, I'm going to write this a little bit differently. So we've got a sentence. We want to split that sentence. I'll tell you what, let's make it easier for now. So let's just say let words, right? We can create variables. Let words equal sentence dot split. Let's not try and be fancy and write it all in one go. Then we want to loop over each word. So words dot find. Find will at least begin that loop. It might not finish it if it finds something relevant. Find, just like filter that we come across earlier, takes a function. And, oops, sorry, I'm writing it of a combination of 2 ways. And inside that function, we want to have our test. We did something very similar in the beginner. We tested to see whether was it a letter was uppercase or something like that. This time we're just testing to see whether a word is uppercase. So what find does is it loops over each element in our array. So to begin with, that element is going to be I, then it's going to be love, then and so on, right?
So could you write words to a triple equal? Words.
Not words, because words is the whole array. Yeah, words is all of that. So I first need to create a variable that references just each element, and that is my input into this function. Yeah, so word, absolutely. Then I want to do some sort of test on the word. I like that, yeah. So this is an operator that is a strict comparison. Does the word strictly equal whatever I put to the right hand side? Yeah, Max suggested it earlier, right? We can transform our word to uppercase, and we can compare that to the original word. So this is the original word, this is the transformed word. If they're exactly the same, then it was already capitalized, right? So that's the one that we're interested in. I'm just going to tidy it up with semicolon a little bit. What else do we need to do? So we've looped over each word because we're using a find function. Let's take this outside, see if each word is capitalized. I think we've done that with that test. If capitalized, return the value. How do we do that?
It's done already.
It's done already, yeah, it is, because find, by default, if it finds something that is truthy, if it finds a capitalized word, it just returns it. There you go. That's the output of the find method. So technically all we would have to do is put return there, and it would return the capitalized value if it found one. However, if there are no capitalized words, find is not going to return an empty string. That is not the default behavior of the find method. Does anyone know what it does return if it finds no matches? Undefined, exactly, yeah. There's a keyword in JavaScript called undefined, which is what all variables are initialized to by default, yeah? We don't want that in this case, right? We specifically have in the question that we want to return an empty string. We do not want to return that value undefined. Again, there are numerous ways to get around that, but any suggestions? Could use an if else, so...
We can just out of the end return empty.
Can add at the end what, sorry?
Return empty.
So you want to...
Empty array.
Empty string we want, but yeah, so you're saying do something like that.
I'm saying like this.
Any issues with that, guys? So we've got a return statement here on line 4, which means we're never going to reach line 7. We're always going to return the result of words.find. That will either be the correct word or it will be undefined.
So can you use the or operator?
Yeah, that's what I would use. I think that's the simplest way to do it, yeah? We're either going to return the result of find, or, how do we say or in JavaScript? There's a, with a double pipe, yeah, the double bar. So 2 of those, or empty string. That I'm fairly happy with, and a semicolon, of course. Let me just cut all of that away. Did anyone do it quite like that? I think everyone did something slightly different to that, those that managed to solve it. But do you like that solution? Is that a fairly good one? Yeah? I think that's about as simple as you're going to get it. We can change the inner function to an arrow function, but maybe that's a bit too much for today, right? We've already done a hell of a lot. But, if we test that, let's see. Confetti, I like it. Any elegance issues? Or almost close, well, close to perfect, but just not quite. Missing space before opening brace. I will take responsibility for that one. I obviously missed that one.
Because at the bottom it says missing something line 3.
Yeah, so that's a really good point, right? So in the Elegance console, if you're thinking, yeah, I know that wasn't the neatest way to write it, but I don't quite understand where I made that Elegance issue. Well, it tells you. This 3-34 means line 3, character 34. So therefore, whoop, go up to line 3. I'm not going to count along, but let's say it's somewhere around here, right? Oh, look, there it is. It's over there. There's the next brace. So I just needed a space there. Yeah. So function inputs space block. Yeah, that's the linting best standard. So that's why it wanted a space there. If I test it again, it should be absolutely happy. Boom. Okay. Would you like to leave it there? Or any other questions? Well done. That was a long workshop, so well done. Thanks for paying attention. I know it's hard when it's dark and it's dark outside and inside, but hopefully it was useful, yeah? So for the rest of the day, just if anyone's had any issues rolling over from the morning, I'm also available to try and sort those out. Begin working on the CodeFlix tasks, or just get your head around some of those. Bit of extra training on the platform. Now we've done lots and it hopefully makes a bit more sense to you. And it'll be 5 o'clock very soon, I imagine. So thanks for your attention and cheers.